our UCS Tech Talk session on IMC Supervisor. This is for version 2.0, and for those of you who aren't familiar with IMC Supervisor, it is a one-to-many tool for standalone Cisco UCS C-Series rack mount servers, and we encourage you to go look at some of our previous recordings around Supervisor and the versions there. They'll talk a little bit more about some of the foundational things. So my name is Kevin Egan. I am a TME manager, technical marketing engineering manager at Cisco Systems, and today I'll be moderating the panel. I'm joined by a few of my colleagues today. Karthik, let's start with you. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Kevin. Hi, everyone. My name is Karthik Jayaraman. I'm a product manager for the IMC Supervisor. I'm really excited to have you all here, and I look forward to a great discussion today.
Thanks, Karthik. All right, Nithya.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nithya Nateshan. I'm a technical marketing engineer, and my focus areas are IMC Supervisor.
Excellent. And then last but not least, Vivek.
Hi, everybody. I'm Vivek Indrayan, and I'm a software developer in the IMC Supervisor team. Very excited and glad to be here today.
Excellent. So we've got a great update for you today, and as I said, IMC Supervisor is our lightweight one-to-many tools, lightweight in the way that it's deployed, but heavyweight in the functionality that it provides. And what we're talking about today builds on the 1.1 version Tech Talk or Google Talk that we did back in November, and right now we are rolling out 2.0. So, Karthik, if you want to kind of recap for the audience what version 1.1 was themed around, that's probably a good starting point for us.
Absolutely, Kevin. The IMC Supervisor versions are cumulative, so the features we saw in 1.1 are in 2.0 as well, so it's a good idea to recap. The major features in 1.1 were primarily around a few themes. The first one being hardware policies and profiles. What it really helped the user do is the ability to extract a desired configuration from a server and then import that to new servers so that it could be easily deployed as well as you can scale up consistently. The other feature we had was around email enhancement, and what this really helped the users do is it helped them have fault notifications generated. And we introduced a little bit of granularity as well as some generic abilities within that. The other area was on firmware enhancements, the primary being ability to use Cisco credentials directly on IMC Supervisor to query for relevant upgrades, especially for firmware images. We also supported the Microsoft Hyper-V. And since then, I'm happy to announce that we had released a couple of patches. The last patch to go out was 1.1.02, and it had a few enhancements and bug fixes.
Excellent, excellent. So, following up on that, let's highlight to the audience what's new with version 2.0, which is really why we're here today, right?
Yes, Kevin. I'm actually very excited about this version as well as with any product from Cisco. We have continuously enhanced it. And this one, the major features are around some of the APIs and managers and smart call home. So let me go over that. The first major feature I want to talk to you about is what we call as northbound API. And what this really does, it helps the users programmatically communicate to IMC Supervisor using REST API. So for example, users can now do custom application development using for things such as ticketing and analytics. The other feature that we introduced here is what we call as a scheduler. This is primarily for group system discovery, firmware upgrades. So in essence, you can set up an upgrade that happens later at night and you don't have to be on it. You can schedule it and leave it, you can have it run. The other feature we have is what we call as an embedded update manager, and what this really does is it automatically checks for new patch updates from Cisco.com using your Cisco credentials and notifies your IMC Supervisor UI. This way, the admins, the end users, they are aware of what patches are available and they can make sure that those are applied. Also, we have introduced what we call a smart call home support, and what this really does is it helps notify any faults generated directly to the Cisco TAC team. So imagine you are at your home. It's 2 a.m. and there's a fault generated by system. The traditional call home generates an email to you, whereas the smart call home feature will generate the fault notification directly to the TAC team.
Excellent. Yeah, so we've got this new northbound API for developers and for customers who are really looking for that, that full functionality northbound. We've got a lot of enhancements around usability and around, group scheduling, and then finally we've got, quite a few enhancements around security and segregation. So that's fantastic. So, what kind of customer benefits are they going to see from these? Can you give us some use cases that customers would experience when they, use the IMC Supervisor in production?
So I can take that question, Kevin, in the meanwhile while we wait for Karthik to rejoin. So typical use cases, I believe Jeff covered it in the previous tech talk as well, are kind of the retail offices. There are several disparate units that are sitting in the branches, and we're talking about remote office, branch office kind of environments. So Karthik, I see that you're back online. Do you want to take the use case question again?
Absolutely. I'm sorry I got disconnected due to a network issue. Yeah, the use cases is something that we have to spend some time on, especially to understand where the IMC Supervisor is being used. What we typically see is around the C series and E series. These are servers that sit behind what we call as ISR routers. And this is where adoption of IMC Supervisor happens, and they're primarily using it in a remote office, branch office operations, where they're using these systems primarily for support such as file and print services. That is the use case where we have seen the majority of adoption. The other use case that we have seen for strong is what we call as retail. This is where our customers have one or two systems per site, and they want to be able to manage those systems using a single pane of glass. And IMC Supervisor, works very well in this situation as well. And the other area we see is traditional data centers as well. So wrap it up, retail, remote office, branch office, agencies where you have an ISR and a couple of systems behind it, and even the traditional data centers. These are the places or use cases where we see strong adoption.
Yeah, and we encourage you to really look at this for all variety of use cases for your UCS rack servers, right? From 220, 240 core servers all the way to the E series, which, as we described, some of the back office functionality. So Karthik highlighted quite a few of the features. Vivek, from an engineering standpoint, can you share what you guys have been busy with? And what else is new from the IMC Supervisor platform level as well?
Sure, Kevin. I would be happy to. To begin with, the platform in IMC Supervisor 2.0 comes with a newer version of Linux and a newer version of Java. Both these are some of the latest versions available today, and they contain a host of security fixes. We also, as Karthik mentioned, this is also the first major release to have support for the Hyper-V platform. Astute users of Supervisor may note that this was available in one of the earlier patched versions in the 1.1 release train, but this is, of course, the first major release to be made. And that basically means that a customer who's buying this or using this for the first time can get started off with Hyper-V right out of the box. Talking about some other interesting features, the non-interactive server diagnostics, which is known as NIIOD, is also something which should prove very useful. If you take customers, something like a branch office where they may not necessarily have the expertise to walk in and access a server and figure out what's going wrong with it. The server diagnostics tool provides you a very nice mechanism to be able to run scripts remotely, having triggered the operation from IMC Supervisor. These scripts figure out the problems and log them in files, and these files are basically sent back to IMC Supervisor, where where an administrator could view and figure out the exact nature of the issue. In addition to server diagnostics, we also allow tech support files generated on a server to be copied and hosted within the IMC Supervisor appliance. This can be very useful in situations where a customer wants to do away with the overhead of setting up an external NFS or CIFS server, which is meant to host these kinds of support files. Finally, the ability to schedule operations such as server discovery and firmware upgrades is also a very nice thing available on the platform now. Discovery could be set up as a recurring schedule, which the customer could run on a daily basis or a weekly basis or anything like that, which allows the customer to discover any new servers which have been added in the network. Firmware upgrades, as Karthik already mentioned, could be scheduled at a later point in the night where the downtime would not really affect normal business operations. So that's a bit about some of the new platform level features available in this release.
That's great. So let's break some of these down. I mean, let's start with the northbound API, and can you elaborate on the scope of this API release, and what's supported and what's not, and help our customers understand how they could what the features are for that.
Sure. Northbound APIs are essentially exposed as REST APIs in IMC Supervisor, and you could categorize them into four categories as of now. They are basically related to firmware management, platform, tasks, server-level tasks, and finally user and group management. As the names suggest by themselves, firmware management APIs typically involve setting up firmware images either locally or on the network, and the ability to be able to trigger firmware upgrades on one or more servers through an API call. Platform level APIs involve the ability to set up email alerts for any new faults that are discovered on servers. The email alert capability already existed in the UI. It's just that we now have a programmatic way to be able to configure them. Server level tasks essentially include discovery of servers, setting up a discovery profile, running a discovery operation, and finally being able to query already discovered servers with respect to their inventory data, their fault data, and so on and so forth. User and group tasks essentially relate to user management in IMC Supervisor. We are talking about administrative users who could access all or a subset of the UI available in IMC Supervisor and carry out any necessary administrative tasks. Now, another feature which I would especially like to call out is related to the ability to query server utilization. This is firstly a new thing added in the background, wherein we have a new system task running in this release. The purpose of that system task is essentially to gather only utilization data on every server being managed by IMC Supervisor. By utilization data, I mean CPU utilization, memory utilization, and disk I/O utilization. This data is gathered from servers on a regular basis and is stored in our database. But the ability to access this data exists only through these northbound APIs. There's a very good use case for this feature wherein somebody wants to bill a customer only on the basis of servers, on the basis of the ability to which servers are utilized or the extent to which servers are utilized. Now, you could set up some kind of a third-party software which calls these APIs on a regular basis and figures out what the utilization of servers are over a period of time. And that essentially can boil down to how much the customer should be billed for using this CPU and memory resources in a server.
So it's much more than just a portal to developer, right? It really allows utilization and data collection as well. I mean, this is something that even customers who don't have the ability to set up a developer toolkit, they can still go and get utilization data from that API as well. That's pretty exciting. If I'm thinking of, I've got all these servers, I want to do data collection. This is really that point to do that as well. So this is not really a beta. or a 1.0 API, right? I mean, this is really full-featured, and it's enabled with 2.0. Can you help customers understand how they would get started using this and what it would take to turn this on, so to speak, in Supervisor 2.0?
Sure. As you rightly said, these APIs are enabled out of the box itself in IMC Supervisor, which means that there's no additional licensing, there's no additional enabling or configurations required to get them working. But of course, since this is the first time we are releasing these APIs as a feature, there would be a learning curve involved for any customer who wants to use this. To enable that, there's a very nice little tool in the administrative portal, which is called the REST API browser. This browser could essentially be used to it basically lists all the APIs that we talked about earlier, and allows the customer to view all the necessary details about these APIs, and to also try and execute these APIs with some kind of data. The data, in fact, could be real data, which is already existing on the IMC Supervisor appliance, which the customer is using. In order to be able to use this tool, the customer essentially needs to enable a developer mode on the administrative portal. They can do this by logging in and clicking on the username bubble on the top right, and by going to the Advanced tab. There's essentially a checkbox there that says Enable Developer Mode. Once they do that, the REST API browser becomes accessible. Now, having spoken about being able to test the APIs, it's also important to touch upon the fact that authentication is a given requirement for any API to run successfully. And this is basically carried out with an API key. The key is auto-generated in the system, and it's unique to every user, the user who logs into the portal. Again, the place where this key is found is just what I mentioned earlier. That is, you go to the portal, go to your user bubble, and go to the Advanced tab. Now, it's important to note that this API key should be included in the HTTP header, which is sent as a REST API request. Finally, I'd just like to mention that while REST API browser is a useful tool, it's of course understood that any customer would actually use these APIs with a third-party tool, like it could be a browser-based tool like Postman or any other third-party REST client, which could actually be some kind of software written in their language of choice. Now, in all cases, of course, the requirement about the API access key holds, which must be passed as in the header, as I already mentioned. So this is a good way to get started with learning the APIs and basically trying to understand how they work.
Yeah, that's great. So, can we talk about how this API builds on the existing IMC's, XML API, and really that, the functionality, the relationship between those, and how we've talked about how this is REST and why, why we chose to go that route from a design perspective? Sure.
So to begin with, IMC Supervisor is essentially built over the XML API exposed by the SIMC firmware running on servers. We do not use any SNMP or IPMI or CLI mechanisms to talk to our servers. We always use XML API. But then, SIMC XML APIs are nice. They are on a per server basis, which means when you're talking about managing multiple servers, you would have to deal with APIs sent to each of these servers separately. So when IMC Supervisor was conceptualized, it basically gives you an aggregated view of several servers that you're managing in your network. And the REST APIs become paramount in importance now because they give you most of the abilities, or rather all of the abilities that XML API does, but on an aggregated level for multiple servers. The reason for going with REST is pretty self-explanatory because it's a very popular API standard in the world today, and it's really easy for anybody who wants to automate server management to be able to write a small piece of software that can send REST requests and get REST responses. Now, basically, REST as a standard consists of a bunch of HTTP requests. There are HTTP GET requests, which are typically used for read operations or queries, and there are HTTP post or put or delete operations methods which are used for write operations. That's exactly the architecture and design that we have followed. Like I had mentioned earlier, the API actions in IMC Supervisor consist of either CRUD actions, which basically are create, reads, updates, and deletes on objects, or probably a special actions which fall outside of these four, which could be something like run a firmware upgrade or run a discovery operation, so on and so forth. Now, the HTTP methods that I talked about fall in line essentially with the nature of the operations that I just mentioned. The other point to note is that these APIs are pretty quick. They almost always involve database reads and writes within the IMC Supervisor appliance itself. Basically, any fault or inventory data that is being collected from servers being managed in IMC Supervisor is already stored in our database. So when a REST API is triggered, say to be able to query the faults of a server or query the inventory data in a server or query the utilization, all we are doing is DB lookup operation locally based on the last inventory run. Of course, there are a few cases where triggering a REST API would involve subsequent XML API requests being sent to the underlying servers. The example typically would be a firmware upgrade. Basically, this would involve an HTTP post request, which is a REST API going into IMC Supervisor. That in turn triggers a firmware upgrade on a server through an XML API. But the REST API response is returned immediately back to the user who triggered the REST API. And the response would basically indicate that a firmware upgrade has been triggered successfully. Of course, the firmware upgrade happens to be a long-standing task, and the user could always query the status of this operation by additional REST APIs, which are essentially HTTP GETs. These again involve database lookups because we are constantly monitoring the state of the upgrade and storing it in the database. So that's typically how things work.
Yeah, so that's great. I mean, if we look, it's the same secure XML API that we've built our foundation for our rack servers on, and is foundational on the IMC. Like you said, there's no SNMP or IPMI. I mean, we do everything through the API. Now we're exposing that API northbound in our one-to-many tool and giving you that RESTful wrapper for it, which gives a lot of functionality. That's fantastic. So, let's see this in action. I know you had a couple of demos to show folks and really show how we're enabling that API and how we're using it to really query server information, which is probably one of our biggest use cases, right? Is just give me that server information.
Sure thing, Kevin. So in my demo, I've opened it up to a variety of things. So top use cases that we see customers use are server-related, like you mentioned. So I will be going over server-related tasks like viewing faults or like inventory and those types of things. So those are typical use cases. So without further ado, let me also do a screen share. So enabling API views from the GUI is something that we've introduced with version 2.0. Though the REST API capability comes out of the box, we expect users to use a tunable knob in the GUI if they want to start playing around with it. So you see that the version is 2.0 here. And if you click at the admin tab here in advanced, there is a little checkbox that Vivek was talking about earlier. This says enable developer menu. And it also says that you have to re-log in. So I've seen some customers, have not enabled this, but they were looking for, ways to play around with things in the GUI. And, this is the answer to that. So you go to admin, you go to advanced, and enable developer menu. And you also see a REST API access key there. So this access key is unique to every user. So you copy the key value for a later use. In policies, API and orchestration, again to reiterate, if you have not enabled that developer menu, this screen will be blank. And I know it's a little bit confusing, but once you enable that tunable knob, that's when the magic happens. And you see that we have enabled APIs in 4 of the categories that Vivek mentioned earlier as well. And today we will be seeing a lot of them around server tasks. So to go with the first example, let's look at viewing faults. These are the current faults, right? So an API and orchestration again, expanding the server tasks. I'm reordering the column just to find firmware, or you can use that little search bar to the top right. As you can tell, this is a read operation. When I click details, I'm presented with a URL. When I go ahead and complete that URL and execute the REST API against the local instance of IMCS that I'm running, I'm able to see all the faults associated with several accounts that I have in my system actually. And these are all grouped by the account names. And if I copy a particular account name and paste it in the URL, I'm able to see the faults that are relevant only to that particular account. So this is a way to start filtering to view server level faults. Now, when you're talking about fault history, it's also a pretty thorough checkup that as admins use today. Sometimes they're not only interested in the current faults, but also just to prove to Vivek's point that you can use any client of your choice to still interact with our APIs. I'm looking up the URL right now. And if I go back to my API client browser, I supplied the key and I'm running the query. The query returns 200 OK from HTTP, and everything gets organized with by the account name. And similar filtering mechanisms apply for the fault history as well. So if I do that, it filters only for that particular account name, and it gives a neat fault history. Viewing server inventory. This is another typical use case that we see customers. They might want to prepare a report on what systems are in IMC Supervisor. So for that, they would use this query. Again, this is also a HTTP GET. I'm just completing the URL, and you see how it is case insensitive. And you see a bunch of inventory getting shown by the account name. I'm going to copy this URL and paste it on my on the client of my choice. You can use you can use a Postman tool too if you want. So I'm sending this URL, and I'm getting a neat response back. And this is a snapshot of the inventory that is sitting in the current version of my IMC Supervisor. As you can tell, it's pretty extensive. Now, if I want to filter an inventory for a particular server, I can go ahead and do that. You will see a slightly different response, not just the truncated response. So you can tell how we've enabled API to be very contextual. If you're asking a system-wide IMC Supervisor report, we give them in a neat nutshell kind of a format. But if you're looking for a specific server, we give you a full dump of what the server is capable of, and the physical components that it's hosting. So we move on to the next use case, which is creating a user. Unlike HTTP GET, this is actually a create operation. So in the details pane here, you see that it's a HTTP post. I'm giving a sample login name and password. I'm filling out all the required parameters that the API will accept. Now I'm actually generating an XML. This is only the intermediate step before I execute the API itself. Now I'm looking at the XML API format that I have to send in order to execute the REST API. So once I've composed that XML, I'm also executing the REST API to see the success message here. One way to verify this is to go to Administrator pane in Users and look into the User tab. Here I see the API admin that I created reflect here. So these are just some use cases that I was talking to you about, Kevin. So we have seen customers use these kinds of APIs to hook it up to their ticketing system, to their report generation tool, and there's a wide variety of use cases that are northbound API answers today.
That's great. So one of the key features that Karthik had mentioned was this scheduling capability, and what I think is really cool is that it's for firmware and for system discovery and for those kind of use cases. Can you talk about how that works and show our audience what that looks like from a discovery scheduling and firmware scheduling perspective?
Absolutely, Kevin. This is something our admins really love, because scheduler means that we don't want people to be up at late night for various operational things. So usually firmware updates are kind of staged for 11 p.m. at night or 2 a.m. at night, and you don't want the admins to be in the lab to push a button, and we've completely automated that process. So today we have two types of scheduling support. It's a one-time scheduling support versus the recurring, and we have typical use cases for these as well. A firmware update will be a one-time scheduler. There is system group discovery that you mentioned. You don't want your admins to lose out on monitoring new servers that are coming into your environment. So when you run such recurring scripts to kind of pull in those systems to monitor from IMC Supervisor, it proves to be a very strong use case. So without further ado, let me show it to you in working. So let's look at a typical one-time scheduler. And the use case that I was talking to you about was firmware updates. So I'm logging to this familiar UI here. Let's take a look at systems and firmware management. This is typically where admins go to. And I'm pushing a button to run an upgrade. And I'm selecting the profile of my choice. I can cherry pick my servers to run this on. And you see a little option there. It says schedule later. And here, if I had already created any schedulers, I would see that there. Otherwise, I can inline create a schedule. So I'm going to call this a one-time scheduler for firmware. I'm enabling it. I am setting it to one time. And perhaps I want it on a Saturday, perhaps at 11 p.m. I'm setting that up and saying submit. It says that the schedule was created successfully. So it also displays what kind of profile it's running and on which server it got set. So if I go to Manage Schedules from Policies tab here, I'm able to see the schedule that I created, and it looks enabled too. And if at any point in time, if I want to edit it, I have the ability to do so. It's not rigid. So now it's not yet scheduled. So on a Saturday night, you would see that getting scheduled. So let's talk about a recurring scheduler, because that is a typical use case for system group discovery. Again, I'm logging into the familiar IMC Supervisor UI, and in Policies, Manage Schedule. This time I'm going to create the schedule and put it in place first, and then access it from the feature of my choice. So let's call this a recurring scheduler for discovery. And I'm going to use the scheduler type as recurring. And I'm going to schedule it for every 24 hours. The schedule is created successfully, and the schedule state also says enabled. Now, if I go back to where I usually do the system discovery, which is under physical accounts, under discovery profiles, I'm able to see all the profiles that I've already set up. So it's all available to me. And in discovered devices, I can go ahead and create a discovery and select the profile that I just viewed. I can pick the discovery method that I really like, and I can say schedule later, and The one that I created there appears here. It says recurring discovery, and the scheduler is successfully scheduled. Now, if I go back to manage schedules and look into the view schedule tasks, you can see that it's already kicked off a system discovery scheduler, and this would run recurring every 24 hours. So these are some of the capabilities that helps admins to not be so much awake and be at the system to push a button. So these are some of the enhancements that we made, Kevin.
Yeah, so that's much more powerful than just deferring a firmware update. You can do that. You can schedule that, but you can also schedule, these recurring system discoveries, and then you can see if there's any type of change from A to B. You could run some simple reports against that, just to keep track of your entire entire domain. So that's pretty exciting. So how about the update manager? We talked about that, and really, can you share how that works? Because I think this is, again, one of those truly unique features to this tool, and to Cisco. So can you share a little bit about that for the audience?
Definitely, Kevin. So with IMC version 2.0, what we've introduced is something called as an embedded update manager. So what that means is not to be confused with firmware updates and everything. This is for updating IMC Supervisor itself. So, we've had people use all sorts of versions of IMC Supervisor, right? And we have a very agile method of development. So we post patches, pretty fairly at a decent pace. So we don't want customers to miss out on the patch updates, that comes with a lot of bugs and enhancements, like Karthik pointed out earlier in the discussion. So with the embedded updater, the system actually notifies the admin whenever there's a new patch available on Cisco.com. And for this, the admins really need to do just one step, sign up their Cisco.com credentials with IMC Supervisor GUI, and the system itself runs a check, once every 14 days to update the admins that a new patch is available. And it also goes one step ahead and downloads that patch image into the local repository. So this is a great feature. I'm really excited to show this to you in a demo. So this is an extension of our capability to where we tie up, we use our admins to tie up, we tell them to tie up to Cisco.com. So that comes in very handy for firmware updates, even for IMC Supervisor patch checks. So in the update IMCS, you have settings, and it already tells me a report of there are no new updates. Now I'm going to go ahead and tie in my Cisco credentials just to enable the feature, and tell IMC Supervisor to go ahead and check for patch. And I have the ability to just let the system be, but I'm going to tell it to check for updates right away. Now I see that IMC Supervisor is polling Cisco.com to check if there were any patch. So after a while, it looks like it did find a patch release posted on Cisco.com, and it's 2.0.0.1.zip file. And it's also pulling it into that location that I was showing you earlier. So, it kind of eliminates the need for, admins to set up an FTP NFS share, go to Cisco.com download site, look for that exact patch version that matches his base IMC Supervisor version, and then, place it in an intermediate file share, and then update it. So it kind of automates, or rather eliminates the need for all this. And IMC Supervisor, prompts admins whenever it's available, and actually goes that extra mile to download it and keep it inside the repository, and also points him to a URL that he can later use for a seamless upgrade to the patch.
Yeah, so this is kind of in that theme with a really lightweight, tool that almost behaves from a desktop productivity type of tool with that, automatic update type feature, but then you get all the functionality and really that enterprise grade of security and everything else. I mean, this is fantastic. So, Karthik mentioned the system diagnostics, so let's talk about that capability. And of course, that's optional, right? You don't have to take advantage of this functionality, but tell customers, and show them, what this looks like from a day-to-day perspective.
Sure thing, Kevin. So, like you mentioned, it's not like an absolute thing that everybody does all the time, because diagnostics is something that admins run when they think a server is having an issue and they want to run a standard type of diagnostic tools that Cisco provides. So again, we've made it extremely simple, and we've had usability in mind for this. So there's no interactive commandlets or something that the admins need to input or keep watching over the diagnostics. Everything happens very seamlessly and in a non-interactive fashion. And I'd be really happy to walk through the knobs in IMC Supervisor to enable this. So, similar familiar GUI, and let's look at where the knob is placed. It's in the systems, just under firmware updates. And so this is a step that you would need to actually configure your image location. So you put the image in one of your ISO share path and point it to maybe it's a www or NFS. We support different types of ISO share types. Now, when I've saved that already, and as you can see in my environment, I have a couple of failures, I have a couple of success messages already displaying there. Now let me go ahead and run diagnostics. Clearly, I have the ability to run it for a server group itself, or just cherry pick one or two servers to run the non-interactive diagnostics. I'm going to pick a server that I think is causing me trouble. So I want to perform some diagnostics on it. And again, you see that it does cause the servers to reboot, and there's a little bit of downtime because the server is already not performing well, and I want to run some diagnostics on it. So I'm okay with the downtime. I'm going to trigger it. And you see how it says initializing immediately. And I'm not actually by the system myself, but I'm able to look at the progress. It's saying that the image is getting booted, and it goes through several such stages during the process, and I'm able to monitor it from IMC Supervisor. And once it completes, it gives me a return message. In this case, it succeeded, looks like. So I have the ability to download the report for offline use, but for now I can view it from IMC Supervisor too. I can see the samples of the tests that IMC Supervisor ran against this particular server, and I'm also able to see if the tests have passed or failed, and how many tests. It looks like 20 tests ran in this case. So this is a very critical feature if you think you need to run diagnostics on any of the servers in your IMC Supervisor environment. IMC Supervisor with version 2.0 has made it seamless for you to look into to run diagnostics on any servers.
So it's really behind the covers, it's there, it's running, customers can take advantage of that without any additional, plugins or anything like that, right?
Absolutely. All you need to do is just point to the SCU image location, and it runs seamlessly behind the covers.
Excellent. So, we talked about call home and smart call home, and really, Karthik, can you share with the customers what the difference is between call home and smart call home, and why we introduced this feature and sort of took it to the next level?
Yes, Kevin. To do so, let me just briefly go back into history and see when call home was introduced and why. So call home, if you remember, was introduced in version 1.0 of the IMC Supervisor, and what we did was we added more features to it, and it kind of indicated more features to it in 1.1, and it kind of indicated to us that the call home feature was getting very popular, and admins were seeing a lot of benefits from it, wherein they don't have to be in the lab, and they would get fall notifications from their systems directly to the email. What we realized is we could take it to the next level, and we could actually make it even more worthwhile for the customers. One of the use cases that we came across is As Nitya pointed out earlier, a lot of the updates happen at 11 p.m. or 2 a.m. at night, and sometimes issues do happen at the same time. And when you have a fault notification at 2 a.m., previously the admins and the customers, they had to really go back to their lab and even look at what was going on and get on phone or get to Cisco TAC. Now what we have done with the Smart Call Home feature is we automatically notify the Cisco TAC team for notifications which might be of a certain critical category. The user has a lot of control over what is classified as critical category as well. They can choose to send the entire IMC inventory as well as faults for Cisco TAC to look into. And the real advantage here is even before the admin is up the next day and running, the Cisco TAC team has already started looking into it. So the feature really is smart in the sense that it automatically notifies the TAC team and gets things on way to get resolved. So this is a really good and cool feature, and I'm really excited about this particular feature in IMC Supervisor 2.0.
Yeah, and customers can turn this on or off, right? If you had test dev, don't want Smart Call Home, obviously, you want to segregate those environments. That's not a problem. If you want to turn Smart Call Home on for a production environment where you have that relationship and that patch secure line to TAC, that's something you can turn on. And of course, you can continue to use your Call Home functionality with your email alerts and do that. So yeah, that's outstanding. So, share with us as the product manager, what else has the team been up to, really? What can we expect from subsequent releases and subsequent development that's going on?
Yes, Kevin. Well, one of Cisco's main goals is being customer-centric. And towards this goal, we always ensure that we are capturing input from our customers and making constant progress in our software. And if you look at it, we have come a long way from IMC Supervisor 1.0 to 2.0, and we want to keep that rolling. And I'm actually, our team is actually working on the next version of the software, wherein we are looking at enhancing some of the schedulers, especially the one that Nitya walked through. There's scope for further future enhancement there. We are looking into it. We are also looking into the C3260 server support. And also we are looking into adding more functionality in the northbound API, something that we discussed in detail today. And furthermore, we are looking into making IMC Supervisor compatible with UCS Director 6.0. So you could, I really encourage our users to tune back in the future and check out these new features as we roll out.
Yeah, that's outstanding. So, how can customers get started with IMC Supervisor today? Version 1.1 offered an evaluation license, and will that continue to be the case with 2.0? How do customers get started with it?
Yes, Kevin. We will we will follow the same methodology as we did in 1.1. The 2.0 comes with an embedded evaluation license. And what this lets the users do is they can evaluate it for 60 days for up to 50 servers. So this gives the users a great opportunity to try out the various things that we discussed today. Nitya had pointed out on scheduler. We discussed about the northbound APIs in detail. We talked about other features such as NI, diagnostics, and things like that. So the user can really kick the tires using the eval license. These licenses get activated when the systems are deployed. So I highly encourage people to go to cisco.com and start trying out our IMC Software Supervisor 2.0 software.
So I mean, it really gives them the advanced features, even though it's an evaluation license. It really gives them all this technology that we've been talking about, right?
Absolutely, all the advanced features are included. And as I said, it's active for 60 days, so it gives them ample time to really check the various features and see, whether this will really work out for them.
Outstanding. So, I'd like to encourage everybody to visit our community site. It's communities.cisco.com/UCS. We've got a lot of content there. You know, it is a developers community, it is a users community, so you know, there are discussions going on, and experts are answering questions. You know, you'll see the team members here answering questions as well, and really that gives you access to you know, where you can pick up the eval and a lot of critical links that you might use. So I really want to thank the panel today for their time and you know, bringing the 2.0 features to us. I would encourage you to go back and watch the 1.1 because it's really, they stand alone. You know, watch the recording of the 1.1 and you'll get some of the core functionality. Today we focused a lot on some of the additional functionality, but in previous Tech Talks we really, you know, what the foundation of that IMC Supervisor one-to-many tool is. So I would encourage you to go back and you know, spend a few minutes and listen to those. So just like to say thank you for attending our Tech Talk today, and hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, everyone, for attending this Tech Talk.